everyone, to the Wednesday, November 16th, 2022 electronic meeting of the Ann Arbor Transportation Commission. This meeting is being held electronically to protect public health and safety. We intend to conduct this meeting similarly to an in-person meeting. Public comment will be via telephone or Zoom only. To speak during any of the public comment opportunities, please call 206-337-9723 and enter meeting ID 960-2232-8200 or join via the Zoom link. All right, I'll now ask Raymond to call the roll, or ask Chris to call the roll, actually. Or is it Raymond?
Yeah, I will now call roll. I've received regrets from Commissioner Margolis, who is not able to attend. Please stay here and from where you're dialing when your name is called. Commissioner Boland.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Briggs.
And I just received a text from Councilmember Briggs that she's running a little late because the airport committee that she's on is going long. So she'll be joining us about 15 minutes late, she thinks.
Okay. Commissioner Broven.
From Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Automaki.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Hook.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Keeler.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Kleinman.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Lee.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Smith.
Oh wait, Smith should be Yang now, right?
Yeah, that's my fault. Sorry, Chris.
Sorry, and lastly, Commissioner Wankoff.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Okay, I believe we are in a quorum.
Great, thanks so much. All right, so there are two items on the consent agenda: approval of the agenda and approval of the minutes from last month.
Forrest, we got you. Yeah, and then also, sorry, Chris, we also go through the non-voting members as well.
My apologies, Commissioner Hess.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Hutchinson.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Lieutenant Mike Sherbaugh is absent, and Commissioner Stupka is also absent. Okay, I believe that's everyone.
Great, thanks. Okay, so consent agenda, approval of tonight's agenda, approval of last month's minutes. Are there any modifications to the consent agenda? Okay, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
I'll move to approve.
I saw Commissioner Lee, and then seconded by Julie. Okay, all those in favor, physically raise your hands or say yes if you're on audio.
Yes.
Great. All those opposed, or no, great, motion passes. Okay. Consent agenda is approved. Next, we're moving on to public comment. So this is an opportunity for people to speak for up to 3 minutes. Please call 206-337-9723 and enter meeting ID number 960-2232-8200 or connect via Zoom as described on the agenda. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand one by one using the last 3 digits of your phone number or your Zoom ID. In order to raise your hand, please press *9 on your phone or select the raise hand button in Zoom. You'll hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. Do we have any public comments?
We do. Adam, I have gone ahead and allowed you to speak. Go ahead and unmute yourself and the floor is yours.
Hello, this is Adam Juskevich from the 4th Ward. I'm calling in support of the resolution to increase ALT fund percentage. As a city, we've committed to a number of goals, including carbon neutrality, cutting vehicle miles traveled in half, and eliminating deaths and debilitating injuries due to traffic violence. If we are serious about meeting these goals, we need to put our money where our mouth is and actually fund the infrastructure improvements that will enable us to meet those commitments. This is a needed, responsible, reasonable, and overdue change. If anything, it doesn't go far enough, but every little bit helps. Please approve this tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. Any other Comments?
I'm not seeing any other hands raised at the moment.
Okay. Great. Then let's see here. Moving on to business, which is the resolution to recommend increasing the alt fund percentage. So in the packet is a resolution that I drafted with Raymond's help that recommends that City Council set aside a larger percentage of our transportation tax dollars for non-motorized improvements. So this is, we talked about this last month. I think it might be easiest maybe to just read the resolution, but the current set aside, this is specifically for Act 51, or we just say Act 51. Yeah, taxes. Oh, thank you. So currently the percentage is 5%. For the alt fund, which is basically everyone not in a car, and the draft that we've got here would recommend bumping this up to 20%. So I will just, I will read it and then we can talk about it as soon as I get to the right window. Okay, here we go. Whereas, as a part of the A20 sustainability plan, Ann Arbor has committed to reducing motor vehicle miles traveled by 50% by 2030 in order to help achieve carbon neutrality. Whereas, as a part of the 2020 Moving Together Toward Vision Zero comprehensive transportation plan, Ann Arbor has committed to reducing serious and fatal motor vehicle crashes to zero. Whereas Ann Arbor sets aside 5% of Act 51 gas tax, which amounts to approximately $500,000 in the annual budget. Whereas Ann Arbor's road funding mechanisms are not aligned with our climate and safety goals, given that it currently allocates 95% of gas tax funds on infrastructure for cars and only 5% on infrastructure for people. Resolved, the Transportation Commission requests that in the upcoming budget cycle, City Council adjusts the division of the Act 51 gas tax funds to 80% for streets and roads and 20% for the alt fund. So that is the resolution. And I thought maybe to kick us off, Raymond could explain a little bit about what the alt fund currently pays for.
Sure thing, Molly. So, I don't know how long this has been in place, but it's been in place for quite some time. First of all, I think, what should be noted here is that the city actually does a set aside for alt fund. Most communities probably do not. So the fact that we at least have some alt fund is at least a step in the right direction. Historically, that money went towards infrastructure projects. Most notably, the two that come to mind since I've been at the city. We had piggy banked several years of alt fund to help provide the local match for the Allen Creek berm opening. This is the tunnel that goes under the railroad tracks that connects to the border trail over there by the Huron River. That was, a huge project. We used a lot of federal funds. I believe it was Transportation Alternative Program funds, TAP funds, and this was used as the local match and also helped with some of the cost overruns, as Nick well knows, on that project. There was also a project a couple years ago where the Miller bike lane was resurfaced just by itself, not the full road resurfacing. The bike lane was in poor condition, and so we went in and resurfaced kind of just the strip of bike lane, and that the alt fund was used for that. However, over time, the purchasing power of alt fund has somewhat diminished because as we put in more bike facilities, the alt fund helps pay for maintenance activities. So when Public Works goes out and sweeps and snowplows bike lanes, they charge that to the alt fund because it does help, maintain those facilities. And, so to a certain extent, we're maybe a victim of our success, where the more of these facilities that we put in, the bigger piece of the pie needs to go to those maintenance activities. And so we actually have less ability to kind of put alt fund towards capital projects or even kind of bankroll it year over year. And now, luckily, there are maybe some other funding sources on the horizon that can help fill gaps. I think you've all heard me report in the past where ARPA is going to be something that we're going to be drawing down. But long term, there is this kind of gap with the alt fund in terms of its ability to fund more non-motorized infrastructure. Does that help, Molly? Would you like some more context?
Yeah, no, that's great. And it sounds like, I think I'd forgotten that it's also used for maintenance, and that's maybe how this originally came up in our conversations, was because of the questions around snow plowing separated bike lanes. And so increasing the funding for the alt fund would mean increasing funding for maintaining separated bike facilities when we get those. Is that right?
Indeed, it would. Yes.
Great. Questions, comments, thoughts about this? Julie?
I just have a teeny friendly comment. I like this a lot. When I read, I guess it's paragraph 3, whereas Ann Arbor sets aside 5% of act. I didn't understand at that point what set aside meant. I was thinking like set aside for what? And it was only with the 4th paragraph that I sort of figured out what you were saying. So I don't know if you want to add something there like sets aside 5% of act for alternative,
non-motorized.
yeah, something like that.
That amendment is friendly. So can we just add Raymond sets aside 5% of Act 51 gas tax for non-motorized transportation.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Julie.
I'm sorry, that was the 3rd whereas clause?
Yeah, so whereas Ann Arbor sets aside 5% of Act 51 gas tax for non-motorized transportation, which amounts to approximately 500,000. Yeah. Other comments or questions? Julie? Oh, you're muted.
Do you want to say anything about how you came up with this particular percentage?
Yes. Basically, I went with what I thought we could get city council to pass, and I doubled it. And that was, I think, the budget is a negotiation always, and there are a lot of different competing needs for the city. And I know that there are some folks on council who care a lot about fixing the roads. But I just decided to ask for more. I think if we could get 20%, that'd be great, because we want a lot more protected bike lanes, and we're going to need to plow them, and we want to build them. And I think that 80-20 looks a lot more like a balance that matches our values than 95 and 5. It's also, to me, it also reflects the fact that non-motorized transportation projects are often much cheaper. The dollar goes a lot farther on those projects, not always. But so it's also, reflecting that, yes, I recognize that motorized transportation projects are often bigger and more expensive. So it's not, I didn't ask for 50-50. Pete.
I would like to point out that in 2016, Washtenaw County, including the city of Ann Arbor, passed a millage for road work. And it was clearly communicated before that millage that 20% of it was going to be set aside for non-motorized transportation projects in the county. And it passed easily. And that's an indication to me, at least, that this 80-20 ratio makes sense to a lot of us in the community. And I'll also say that was 6 years ago. So maybe that 20 has, maybe there's appetite for even more than 20 now, 6 years after that was approved for Washtenaw County. So 20 is a good starting point as far as I'm concerned.
And Molly, Larry has his hand up.
Okay, great. Larry.
Does this also include crosswalk maintenance and APS maintenance and that sort of thing?
Yeah, Larry, it definitely can. When we use alt fund, we have lots of different pots of funding that we tap into. So there is some crosswalk set aside that we have from I believe that's the street millage. Is that right, Nick? Where the crosswalk funding comes from. So, but yeah, we can tend to kind of mix and match depending upon which pot of funding we have available, the scale of the project, if we need to kind of leverage different funding sources. But yeah, this alt fund can definitely go towards crosswalk improvements and pedestrian improvements.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Briggs, I wanted to give you a chance to jump in if you need to get caught up. We're talking about the resolution to increase the alt fund allocation from 5% to 20%.
Yeah, I'm sorry to join late. I was in an Airport Advisory Commission, so I was thinking transportation, just a different part of our network. So sorry to miss. I'll go back and listen to folks' comments earlier. I believe we need to align our funding with our transportation goals. I do think that one of the challenges that I have a little bit from my role is understanding we're pulling from a variety of different pots to do this, and we've seen this in our previous presentations around the budget. And I think sometimes we're not even, there are cases we're not even clear internally in terms of how much of a project is really going to non-motorized versus motorized. Is sometimes a little difficult to distinguish. Is that pain on the road for the bike lanes, or is it there for the cars? So I think we need to carefully think about how we're doing this and how it impacts, how it interacts with our new millage for the climate action millage and more of the funding coming in there. But it's definitely a conversation that we need to be having at budget time. So I respect desire for Transportation Commission to shift more funding towards our stated priorities.
Great, thanks. Yeah, Wanwu.
Hey, thanks. Overall, I think this is, I'm in support of this. The thing that I want to kind of understand is what is the kind of opportunity cost with respect to the $1.5 million that would be redirected? So, what are the kind of incremental costs associated with that? So, does it mean 7th doesn't get paved or something like that, right? So I don't really have a good sense of that scale and what that $1.5 million would do. Again, I think I've said it here, I've said it on planning, strengthening non-motorized transit should be, or at least that infrastructure should be a priority of ours from an equity standpoint, from an access standpoint. We want to create additional porosity. So again, I think on principle, I'm certainly in support of this. I just don't have a very good sense of what that opportunity cost is. So I don't know if there's something that you could share as far as, and I know that you had said that the percentages were predicated on what you thought you would get council to pass and doubled it. And obviously that plays into it as a kind of a negotiation tactic, but I'm just trying to get it also kind of an underpinning of what is that opportunity cost?
Yeah. I think the 80-20 division that Pete was describing earlier it's becoming something that we see elsewhere. So it was, there were other reasons too, but I'll let Raymond speak to what that money might have been going to if we were allocating it how we have been.
Yeah, well, I don't think I have the best answer because the other part of Act 51 is a pot of funding that I have fingerprints on, per se. If I'm not mistaken, and maybe Nick can help me, or maybe even if Erica knows, I think a lot of the street maintenance activities are funded with Act 51. So that's where we see pothole filling, where you see road plowing, where you see street sweeping. I think all of those activities are covered under Act 51. In terms of, the impact of, if, hypothetically, if this went from 5% to 20% to alt fund, there would be less money in the rest of the pie for those activities. I don't know if, operationally what that impact would be. I don't know if it would just mean maybe street sweeping less, or maybe there's less carry forward balance. I know that's another, thing that a lot of our funds do if we don't draw it all down one year. The other thing I've heard from both Marty Prashant, our CFO, and Molly Maciejewski, our Public Works Director, is a lot of those maintenance activities are highly variable, especially dependent upon snowfall. So if we have a very heavy snow year, they tend to be over budget on their plowing because it was just unanticipated. It's really hard to kind of crystal ball how much labor you need on every winter. But if it's a light year, we might have a carry forward balance. So I could maybe try to follow up with the Marty Prashant, the CFO, and give you some additional details on terms of what that trade-off might look like.
Gotcha. No, I appreciate that. And probably not a very clear answer either, right? From the standpoint of there's just a lot of diffuse areas in which that 95% may be headed towards. So just trying to, better understand. But again, I think the priority is strengthening. I mean, obviously a 95 to 5% ratio doesn't seem very, it doesn't seem to align with the values that we have tried to put forth as a community. So again, I'm in favor of this. It was just simply me trying to better understand the trade-offs associated. So thank you. I'll be in support. Thanks.
Great, thanks.
And Nick, just real quickly, sorry to you typically don't tap Act 51 for capital street projects, right? We use the street millage and other sources for that. Is that?
Well, we do for our capital preventative maintenance projects for things like doing the Cape Seals and the Surrey Seals to maintain the condition of a pavement that's in good shape, which is kind of key for our asset management strategy. But the major road repaving projects are generally funded out of the street millage.
Yeah. So there's another possible impact, right? That some of that preventive maintenance might take a dip.
Yeah, and overall, I'd say the answer usually when these types of questions come up, there's not immediate defined answers of like, well, if more money goes from Act 51 to here, then what would need to get cut? And usually answers, well, something needs to get cut. But there's usually not like it's just going to come from here. Somebody at some point will need to figure out what activities we don't do if the money goes elsewhere, or what we do less of. So you're probably not going to get an immediate clear answer about we won't do this if the money goes here instead.
Gotcha. It's got to be kind of an iterative process. So thank you, though. I appreciate
that. Yeah.
Erica.
Yeah, I mean, and to that point, I think it's good for us to have an understanding of, the big picture, how the funding is getting allocated, because that's really what we're talking about in terms of how is our transportation budget getting aligned with our transportation goals, and some having flexibility in how some of those funds get spent. It may be more important that one fund is aligned a little bit more one direction and another fund is aligned a little bit more in another direction, but. In general, I support this. The one area that I might ask that the Transportation Commission think about making just a small little tweak to the resolution that's going to council is in the last whereas clause, where it says, whereas Ann Arbor's road funding mechanisms are not aligned with our climate and safety goals. And then after the comma, given that it currently allocates 95% of the gas tax funds on infrastructure for cars and only 5% on infrastructure for people. And I would suggest that, while I understand kind of the sentiment behind that, I do think that there's people in each of those vehicles. There's people in transit, there's people in cars, there are people on bikes, there are people on foot. So it might be a more persuasive whereas clause if it just stopped at the goals. But just my input, I will look to whatever the wisdom of the Transportation Commission is on this.
I can take other feedback about that clause. Council doesn't have to reproduce this language when they make their own decision about this.
I know. I'm just thinking of folks who are across the community who might be reading it.
Julie. Oh, you're muted.
Sort of in line with that, I'm sort of confused about what all means. Like, does that include busing? Does that include sidewalk snow removal? What does that include? And so connected to that is this cars versus people division, like it's not just cars either, but fire trucks and ambulances and buses and things like that too.
Yeah. Raymond, maybe I don't actually know what encompasses alt.
Yeah, so I think the idea behind alt was really the non-motorized transportation elements. So, and again, it was established before my time, so I admittedly haven't looked at the enabling set aside carve out language that established this fund, but The way I've always been told is it pretty much goes to bike and ped infrastructure. Historically, we have not funded, transit improvements because the ride is responsible for those. Now we do try to coordinate with projects where there is overlap and, interplay between a transit stop, for example. But a lot of times the transit elements are funded by transit. And then in terms of like emergency responders, with few exception, they're just considered a road user or a vehicle. Now, sometimes we're looking at special signal things, but by and large, I don't think, and maybe Nick, you know better than I do, I don't know that we treat any road differently if it's an emergency response route or anything like that, in terms of like surface that we use or treatments or anything like that.
No, we do not.
Yeah.
Would
Does
you
that help, Julie? Is that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking back to the presentation of the bus millage and thinking that even if we give AAATA all that money, if the city does nothing to sort of help, make that functional, that it may not be successful.
How do we feel about 95% for motor vehicles and 5% for all other modes? Erica, would that get closer to?
Yes, I think that gets more to the sentiment of, that was cool.
So I will accept that amendment also. I'm not seeing any other hands. So,
And Molly, I'm sorry to interrupt. Larry, I see your hand up, but I don't know if that was from before. I wasn't paying attention. Okay, I'll assume that's from before.
Okay. So reminder, we've got two amendments. One of them is in the third whereas clause, to make it clear, wherein Arbor sets aside 5% of Act 51 gas tax funds for non-motorized we're adding for non-motorized transportation. And then in a fourth one, we're going to change that last clause. Currently allocates 95% of gas tax funds for infrastructure for motor vehicles and only 5% for all other modes. So do I have a motion to approve this resolution as amended? I saw Brett first. Do I have a second? Megan? All right. All those in favor, please physically raise your hand or say yes.
Yes.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? All right. The resolution passes and we will send this off to council. This is good timing. They have not yet, I believe not yet. Yeah, no, definitely not yet started the budget process. So this will get into the conversation right at the start. Thanks, everyone. Moving on, we've got the 2023 meeting schedule. I think this is going to be Raymond.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and share the schedule that we have drafted. Hopefully this will show up. All right. Okay, so included in the packet is this attachment, which outlines a possible meeting schedule for calendar year 2023. The schedule that you see before you, it keeps the same meeting cadence that you have now, which is the third Wednesday of every month at 7 p.m. We quickly scanned, we didn't see any potential conflicts with holidays. The December meeting, it's a little bit earlier, and so it's not falling the same week as Christmas like it is this year. But if you still think that's still a little close, we can look to maybe reschedule that. I will say, thanks to Chris, we did scan to see if there were other meeting dates available. And because the city has a lot of boards, commissions, and committees, there are not a lot of good choices available to you, especially if it's an after work hours type meeting. pretty much the only times available if you wanted to deviate from this would be Friday meetings, which are completely open, maybe not surprisingly to some of you. And we did find slots on the second and fourth Thursday at 4 p.m. It would be earlier in the day. And the reason why it would have to be at 4 is I believe there's a 7 o'clock meeting on Thursday. So then this would allow, the commission to have a 2-hour meeting, and then, CTN and others to transition to, that 7 o'clock meeting. So unfortunately, there aren't a lot of options aside from the meeting that you have now. We can come back with an alternative schedule if you'd like at the next meeting. But if you're comfortable with what we're proposing here tonight, we are asking for the commission to approve this meeting schedule either tonight or next month. So then that way we can upload your calendar with the city clerk and the city calendar.
Thanks. Pete.
Did you get any feedback from Ann Arbor Public Schools about a day that would be better for their representative to attend?
I have talked to Liz Margolis, and I haven't got a committal answer if we move the date about whether they'll participate or not. So I don't know if changing the meeting date to try to accommodate Ann Arbor Public Schools will result in better attendance or not. Now, granted, there are people, residents and others that might want to attend both. So then, there is an inherent conflict beyond just the staff members. But again, the choices, even if we were to move it to a different day and time, they are fairly limited.
Okay. I guess I would like to see, I'd like their voice to be here with us too. So is that something that we could try and work out over the next month and vote on this calendar next month? Or is it, in your opinion, is it worth putting the effort into? Or sounds like maybe not.
Yeah, I'm happy to broach the issue with Ann Arbor Public Schools. They are an external entity, right? So I don't have, just like we have very rarely have participation from RTA, the university, Ann Arbor Public Schools. It's if they choose not to come, I don't. That's their decision. So.
Okay. All right. I understand. Thank you.
Erica.
Yeah, on the school related issue, there is a school city transportation committee that hasn't met since I've been in office the last couple of years, but I do think that it would be worthwhile to take a look at the composition of that, understand if we might be able to restructure it in a way that it might feel like it's, if that's the issue in terms of if there are any structural issues, if there are any changes there, and then think about maybe that has a little bit more flexibility in terms of when the meeting times could be. Maybe it's something that happens during the day, but it has a more focused purpose so that those who are part of the educational institutions in town, or at least if it's just the APS, that it's a more focused conversation and it feels more productive for them. I do think there's some pretty significant transportation issues related to city school connections, but I wonder if, we might be able to move them forward in a smaller subgroup of transportation commission members and city school folks.
Yeah, that's another possibility. So it sounds like I'm hearing a desire to try and give it a month, see if we can check in with the schools and see if there's anything we can do that would increase school AAPS staff participation in commission meetings. Aside from that, does anyone see any issues with any of the scheduled meetings? I know we had also talked about moving it because of the way that this is right on top of the Disability Commission meetings. And so it makes it tough for our representative from the Disability Commission. There's like a lot of meetings in a row. Larry, I don't know. I don't want to put you on the spot about that, but just to, I don't know that you were on the commission when we first started having that conversation. So that's another thing that we had been.
Oh, it doesn't really bother me that much. It's
Okay.
just, yeah, it just cuts in a little later.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a meeting.
Yeah, it is a meeting. All right. Okay, that's helpful to know that at least for the moment it works for you. So can we bring this back on in December? Is that
Yeah, happy to. And then what I can try to do is, based on the conversations I have with Ann Arbor Public Schools, if they, do recommend one of the other time slots. Let me just get a quick read from the group. How difficult or problematic would it be, if I go to the schools and say, hey, here are the options, right? The current meeting conflicts with the school board, so we can either do Fridays or Thursdays at 4. But I don't want to put something on the table to them if it's not acceptable to you, right? So, if there's a quick read, I don't know if you want to just do a quick hand count to see, who could make generally a Friday meeting or a Thursday 4 o'clock meeting. That might be helpful, just so I can narrow down the conversation. Would that be helpful?
Yeah, Pete, did you want to say something? Or
I do. What are the prospects for this meeting staying virtual? A 4 o'clock virtual meeting is a lot easier for me to accommodate than 4 o'clock meeting in person if we go back to in-person meetings. So what's the outlook there?
Yeah, so I have reached out to, and I believe Chris has as well, to the city clerk's office asking that very question. Right now, there is there's no indication that non-required boards will go to in-person meetings anytime soon. And non-required boards is not the right nomenclature, so forgive me for that, but there are those boards and commissions statutorily required to meet, such as City Council, Planning Commission, AAATA, others. They have to meet in person via state law. Advisory commissions such as this one do not. And so the preliminary direction I've gotten is that we will continue to meet virtually for the foreseeable future.
Okay. Megan, did you also have, I see, yeah.
Yeah, so Pete's concern is a good one. I think like 4 p.m. for me would be a little rough personally. I'm often not done with work by then.
Yeah. Erica?
Yeah, and there will be council member reappointments to commissions, and I love Transportation Commission, but other people love transportation as well. So we have to spread the love around. So I'm not going to weigh in too much. I will say that Fridays are often challenging because of the amount of commissions that folks are appointed to. So Fridays are a challenging day sometimes, but I'm sure folks will try to make whatever work.
For me, it'd be Thursdays be better than Fridays, but I can do them both.
Yeah, same. But Thursdays at 4 would not be great for me either. So part of the waiting to talk to APS, if we don't really have anywhere to move it to, might just mean that we risk not having quorum in December potentially, since it's an odd meeting time this month. AAPS can move their meetings to whenever they want, but
And there is an option too. We can always amend meeting dates given sufficient notice. So, these things are not set in stone. We obviously schedule them a year in advance so people can get them on their calendars. But if we have to move dates around, that's always a possibility as well. So,
Brett.
Yeah, just the school board meetings. I think there are some off meetings in the summer. I know they don't meet nearly as regularly in the summer, so there might be some opportunity for attendance then. Or, we could also maybe just have a special session or something. I mean, yeah, I'm not, of those 3 proposed times, this one is definitely the best for me personally, but, I'm just thinking like if this is all around just trying to get like a half hour presentation or a meeting with an AAPS rep, then I don't know if I'd want to change the whole schedule for like one agenda topic a year, but
yeah,
that's my opinion. And again, I think there are regular conflicts, but not necessarily 12 a year, I think.
Yeah. The first meeting that I chaired was February of 2020, and I do remember that Commissioner Margolis was in attendance. So in the before times, we did get at least occasional APS attendance. Pete.
I guess I'm okay leaving the schedule as is and looking for other ways to engage AAPS. But Brett, to your point, I will point out that topics that maybe aren't directly related to AAPS, like 7th and Greenview, we talked a lot about schools when we were talking about 7th. And that was a time when I really wanted that the school's opinion to be represented. So, but there may be other ways to achieve that. So I'm okay looking for, like Erica has suggested, another way to do that.
Great. All right. In that case, do I have a motion to recommend approval of the 2023 meeting schedule, which sets our commission meetings on the third Wednesday of every month at 7 p.m. I saw Wanwu, seconded by Julie. All those in favor, physically raise your hands or say yes.
Yeah.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Great. We have a schedule for 2023. Next up, we've got the Transit Propulsion Study Overview with Matt Carpenter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for having me this evening. It's wonderful to see many familiar faces. Mr. Lee, how you doing? Thank you for your time. I'm here today to introduce a subject near and dear to a lot of people's hearts. It's about climate action at the Public Transit Agency, and ask for your help. I have an ask for you, commissioners, as well. Although I love Commissioner Boland's idea of giving all the cities money to the Transit Authority from earlier in the meeting, I understand that motion didn't pass, so we'll just forget that one was discussed. But I do have an ask for you. I also understand I only have about 20 minutes, so I'm going to try to speak just briefly, maybe for 10 minutes, give you guys an overview of the subject, and then leave the next 10 minutes for whatever questions or discussion we may have. So hopefully, yes, I see I can share my screen. But before I do, so a big part of the environment and reducing our carbon footprint, as outlined in the A20 plan, is decarbonizing different sectors of our city. Housing, facilities, energy generation, and of course the transportation sector. And this is not an easy nut to crack. By a lot of research that we've been doing kind of suggests transportation may be one of the more expensive industrial sectors to decarbonize for a variety of reasons. So we're interested in trying to get started, but it's probably going to be a bit of a slow road. We wanted to make sure we understood the latest state of technologies, because there's a lot of interesting propulsion technologies out of there. The ground is changing very rapidly as demand increases and things are evolving. So we hired a consulting firm called Stantec to do a bit of a desk exercise for us, some background research. What is the state of the practice as it pertains to public transit propulsion technology? We weren't asking for a recommendation because we knew our board needed a lot more information before we got there. But we wanted them to lay out what the main technologies were, the pros and cons, the risks and benefits, and of course, importantly, the costs and the opportunity costs. So we began that project several months ago, and we have a draft report that we've put out on the street, and we're seeking public feedback on it this month. That's my ask to you, is nothing else than your feedback this evening. And if you wouldn't mind, help us get the word out and let people know that this opportunity to share their feedback exists. And we'd love to hear from them, maybe over the next week or two, so we can begin to finish up the report. But that will only be the beginning of the process. We probably have several months to go before we reach any sort of decision. So this early point is just about have a look at the research and tell us what you think. So I'm going to share my screen now, walk you through just a couple of things. So you should be seeing a part of our website now. Yeah, thumbs up. All right. So we have on our website a page dedicated to this project, Alternative Bus Propulsion Study. If you were to visit here and in the future, you'll find a lot of good information. The final report itself, all 200 something pages, is right there. I understand you may have received that as part of the packet for this evening. I hope everyone read the whole thing. If not, you can read just the executive summary. You can even watch a video about the executive summary to save yourself a little more time. Additional resources, we found a lot of great videos online that sort of talk about various elements of this decision, the different technologies, some of the challenges and opportunities that they represent. We've done some meetings. Unfortunately, they were all yesterday, so that ship has sort of sailed. And we have an opportunity for public comment. So if you want to give us your feedback via this web form, that's a great way so that we can keep track of all the comments. So I'm just going to touch on a couple of high-level points coming from the study, which has really been, a lot of fun for me. I've really geeked out on this. I got to get in touch with my inner mechanical engineer and learn a lot about the various issues going on here. It's been a real education. So very quickly, we sort of looked at a variety of things and quickly focused down into two main technologies that are growing fairly rapidly in our industry: battery electric buses and hydrogen fuel cell electric buses. So very quickly, a battery electric bus is, the Tesla of buses. It's propulsion, electric traction motors in the axles run by very big batteries where they store the energy. Fueling occurs from recharging stations that can come in a variety of shapes and sizes. Hydrogen fuel cell electric buses are another technology. Is very related, very similar. They are also electric buses. They have electric traction motors. The difference is they store the energy on board in a different format, in compressed hydrogen gas or liquefied hydrogen gas. The hydrogen, through electrolysis, is converted into electric charge. It charges a small battery continuously, and that battery runs the electric traction motors. The refueling is a very different thing, much more akin to the refueling of our diesel buses from a filling station in our garage, like it's done today. So this is just a shot of some of the supply chains for what a battery electric bus looks like. Of course, it's hooked up to the electrical grid, and the charging comes in a...
Matt, I don't know if you're showing us slides or images right now, but we're not seeing them.
You're not?
We're still seeing the comments, the browser window.
Oh dear. All right, let me see what I can do about that. Okay, let's try again. How's that? Better? All right. Okay, thank you. Yes. So this slide, with its pictures and images, shows a bit about how the electricity gets to charge the bus. And you can see in the picture on the lower right-hand side, one way of doing it. The red devices attached to the roof are overhead catenary powering apparatus. They lower into place to touch the charging battery studs on the top of the buses. More conventional way is just with big wires that hang out of the ceiling and just plug it in like a Tesla. I've changed the slide. Did it change? Wonderful. Okay, some of the pros of the battery electric bus that uncovered. Slightly cheaper than the hydrogen buses, although both battery and hydrogen buses are considerably more expensive than the diesels. They have lower maintenance costs, and the battery ranges are expected to improve. There's a lot of technological advancement going on in this space, and arguably lower fuel costs. The big downside with the battery buses is range and range anxiety. A big difference between a passenger car like a Tesla and a bus has to do with what we call the duty cycle. Personal car is a light duty vehicle. Maybe it runs 30, 45 minutes in the morning. It's plugged in for a few hours. You take it out, go to lunch, plug it back in, go home. Maybe there's a road trip in there once in a while. A heavy duty transit bus, by comparison, can be in continuous operation for 16 straight hours a day. They can leave the garage at 6 a.m. and not come back until 1 a.m. In the winter, they need to heat this very large passenger compartment, and the door keeps opening and shutting. That creates a very strong draw on electrical systems if that's what you're using. So the battery electric buses, where they are right now, is they certainly work. The bus rolls, but they can't deploy fully to meet the scale and range that diesel buses historically can do with no problem. So we've discovered that only about 2/3 of our routes could actually be covered on a daily basis before the batteries just run out. So that presents a logical problem, the difficulty in scaling this particular technology that may or may not be worked out over the coming years. I think that's the biggest issue we uncovered with the battery buses. There are a number of other considerations as well. Moving on to the next slide. I hope everyone sees a slide about hydrogen buses. Pete's sort of nodding there. So the fuel supply chain here is quite a bit different. It's obviously delivered more like diesel in a tanker truck, filled up in a large tank. That tank goes through a number of mechanical processes before it can be used to fuel a bus, but the fueling is very conventional for us, very familiar to what we would do with a gas-powered car or a diesel bus. Pros, much longer range. These things can cover 90 or more % of our routes, even in the cold. Minimal changes to our servicing and fueling practices, which is an important part of our internal efficiencies. Again, lower maintenance costs than diesel, maybe a bit more expensive than electric, and possibly more cost effective at scale. One of the things is no matter how many more hydrogen buses you buy, you still just have the one hydrogen filling station. For every electric bus you buy, you have to have a charger. So the literally overhead costs grow quickly with the battery buses. Downsides, obviously a lot of space required for that hydrogen fueling station, much bigger upfront costs to build that station. The vehicles are a bit more expensive right now, a lot of upgrades and expensive fuel coming forward. We did a lot of financial modeling. I'm not going to go into excruciating detail about that right now, although I'm sure you would all love to hear me go into excruciating detail about the finances. I'm going to actually skip up to some of the high level things, the benefits, of possibly converting our fleet in the future. We could save 7,000 to 10,000 tons of greenhouse gas emissions a year from this process. This is not bad. It's also not that big. When we look at it, it represents about 0.5% of all the carbon emissions in the community. So when we talked about decarbonizing the transportation sector, this is part of the challenge. Buses are already pretty efficient in their emissions situation. So getting this last little bit of emissions out of the system will be an expensive undertaking, and we need to grapple with that. It would probably need to be phased in over a number of years. Buses last 12 years, so this may be a 12 to 20 year process. There are potential cost savings over diesel. Particularly interesting is the maintenance cost savings. We've had several of these buses visit the garage, and obviously a much simpler mechanical device to service as well. Costs are significant, as we said. We're estimating, possibly up to $75 million additional dollars over the next 20, 25 years to purchase and implement these things. It's a premium. The vehicles themselves cost anywhere from 50 to 100% more than a diesel bus does. The charging structures and fueling structures are also quite expensive. However, There's some pretty good competitive grants out there right now from the federal government, and we hope that those continue going forward. That could pay for, frankly, a good chunk of that. So we're angling towards a grant submission to the federal government that would pay the bulk of the capital costs for doing this. This does leave us exposed to the risk of operating costs, which primarily come from range issues with the battery buses and the fuel costs themselves. Electrical rates are complex things to model and use at scale, and the hydrogen fueling supply is pretty underdeveloped at this point. So hopefully those things will begin to change. So, Madam Chair, with that, I will stop sharing my screen and happy to, love to hear any questions or thoughts you guys have. And, again, my ask is to just help us raise awareness that this report is out there. We'd love to get people's feedback and just drive people to our website. That's where all the information is. But happy to answer any questions you may have.
Great, thanks. I'll just take a question stack. Brett.
Where do the current hybrid buses fit in terms of greenhouse gas reduction and cost and all this?
They're slightly more fuel efficient than the latest model of diesel buses, but they cost about 50% more. So that direction, the cost benefit thing there really hasn't panned out. What happened, I would say 10, 15 years ago, hybrids maybe were the best option. And diesel buses of that era were much more polluting. Then we had EPA regulations come in 2010 that fundamentally changed heavy duty bus engines. They're burned much cleaner now than they did back then. So diesel became cleaner and cleaner, and the costs stayed low. The hybrids stayed expensive, and just their performance didn't improve. They also are mechanically more complex because you have two propulsion systems and not just one, so twice as many things to break.
Pete.
Thanks for the report. I have a couple of questions, though, about the assumptions that were used for calculating CO2 emissions. And I guess what I understand from the report is that we're calculating the CO2 emissions of battery electric vehicles based on buying green power from DET. And I guess I don't, it's not clear to me how participating in DET's green power program lessens the carbon output of the electricity that we would buy, or the carbon impact of the electricity we would buy. And I can't find any details from DTE about what they do with the extra money that you pay for buying green energy. So I would personally prefer to see the carbon impact of alternatives like the battery electric buses be calculated with DTE's the actual mix of green and fossil fuels that they use. And I understand from the report that that's 15% right now. I think it's mandated to increase, but I would like to know what the CO2 output for the battery vehicles would be based on the actual mix. What I want to make sure is that battery vehicles don't end up creating more carbon output with all of the electricity that they use. And that's not clear from the information that's in there now. The other thing that I noticed was that the assumptions for the financial and emissions modeling don't include an assumption for miles per kilowatt hour of battery electric vehicles. How many miles can they go on a single kilowatt hour? And that to me seems like a really critical piece of information for figuring out, how much CO2 output there would be with battery electric vehicles, and being able to compare that to what a diesel vehicle would, because we know the miles per gallon performance of a diesel vehicle that is in the report. So those are my observations and slightly more analysis that I would like to see, so that we can make sure we're really putting the increased capital expenditure in a place that gets us the most bang for the buck in terms of reducing CO2 output.
Thank you.
All right, Brett.
Yeah, to Pete's last question, there's some discussion on, I think, pages 78, 79, 80 of the full report on, some tables for kilowatt hours per mile for a few different bus models. So there's some discussion there in the kilowatt hour per mile unit domain. I also want to commend the people who did this study for considering cold weather. The effect of cold weather. It's a completely new consideration that conventional buses don't have to think about, but it can be a more than 50% reduction in range, maybe 60 or 65% reduction in range. So that's really, really significant and a hard hurdle to overcome for the battery electric buses. I have a question though about with the considerable capital cost, the incremental cost over diesel buses, is the proposed funding or grants, the available grants, which seems like the country is kind of flush with right now, are they dependent on having a plan, a purchase order or something? That do you have to decide right now, or can we just try to start going after money, after these grants while they're available? I don't know. It just seems like it's a little bit cart before the horse. It's a great study, and I think hopefully it will be needed, but it seems like if we can't get a huge amount of grant money, this is kind of a moot point.
Thank you. I think looking before we jump is never a moot exercise, but I take your point about admiring the problem for too long that the opportunity passes. I think that is a very legitimate point. To your question, yes, actually, the feds do require us to have a very specific type of plan that represents our commitment to move towards some type of zero emissions technology in order to qualify for the grant. So we do have to demonstrate that we're serious. Also, keep in mind, from their point of view, they don't want to shovel money into Ann Arbor and then find that we're a bunch of jokers who really never had a plan to begin with, and 10 years from now we still haven't spent the money. That makes the federal government a little upset, and then they don't give you any more money. So they will want us to execute, and having done work like this increases their confidence in, or agencies like ours, that we're not jokers, that we know what we're doing. We've looked at this, given it our due diligence, and we're serious. So we are struggling with how to hit the timelines. I am optimistic because of recent election results that, maybe there will continue to be political will in this direction for the foreseeable future. One of the things we're also thinking about, and this kind of blows my mind, is there could be a future out there where getting parts for a diesel bus is kind of like finding parts for a 58 Packard. It's just, you got to go to eBay. You can't do it. The technology is moving, and we want to make sure that we don't, get left behind completely. But doing this work, I think, is an important pre-step that will serve us well down the road.
Erica.
Yeah, folks here just might be interested to know the Energy Commission. If you go and search on the Legistar there for, or on the city's website for the sustainable energy utility, there's a lot of information about there's a feasibility study that's underway right now to look at how we're going to power ourselves in the future. And so I think maybe that comes into play as well in terms of what our future sources of energy might be. Obviously, we're a long way from understanding what that might be at this point, but there's some good, interesting presentations. Also, the last presentation on Energy Commission involved presentation by DTE on their My Green Power program, just FYI. I'm curious in terms of technology changes, and I have not read the report yet, so I will do that. And so it may touch on this, but with changing technology, I know that electric vehicles, I mean, this is where the future is for the industry. Is there a sense that, especially on the range issues, that it might be a lot more beneficial to be, entering into the market in 5 years, or, is there any sense around what's coming but's not quite here yet, or?
Yes. One of the things that the report, I think, does quite well is sort of acknowledges the early stage of the learning curve the industry is in. We've been using diesel buses for 100 years. They're very mature technology. Compressed natural gas is a very mature technology. When you do a cost estimate for those technologies, you can hit it pretty spot on. The oldest hydrogen bus is about 20 years old. The oldest battery electric bus is 8. So they haven't even made it through a full life cycle yet. So we don't even know what the life cycle costs for some of them are. So there is a great deal of risk on all of these technologies. And in part because they are evolving quickly, there's a lot of hope that technology and technological fixes are going to resolve some of the issues. But there's also what I call the VCR Betamax possibility, that we've got these two technologies right now. One of them might not be around in a few years. It may fall by the wayside and no longer be a practical consideration. And right now, we can't really clearly tell which one of these things it is. The battery buses are very popular, frankly, for public relations purposes, because they're quick and easy, and they will at least go as far as the TV cameras. But in practice, we're finding that they're not used as much as you might expect. Whereas the hydrogen group is getting a lot more interest recently because of the range issue. But there's a lot of cautious optimism that breakthroughs in battery technology might eliminate that problem, and batteries might become a very surefire way of doing it. One of the things we've encountered, however, and I don't know if any of you are aware, what it takes to get the minerals necessary to build batteries at this scale. The mining operations for cobalt, nickel, and other earth elements that go into batteries, it's pretty dirty, and it's done in a lot of parts of the globe where environmental regulations and safety regulations and child labor laws are somewhat more lax than we're used to here. So there are implications pretty much in every direction on this. There is no magic bullet. There is no easy solution. Waiting 5 years is a very real possibility. We would know a whole lot more 5 years from now than we do today. But I'm not sure we want to wait. I'm not sure the community wants to wait. So finding a way to make progress, even small progress, is kind of what we're looking for at the moment. We want to at least get started.
Thanks. And the other thing that I didn't really see factored into the pro-con list was you mentioned sort of the impact on maintenance, which also obviously there's a maintenance staff. And so thinking about the impact on labor, I think is important as well.
And thanks for bringing that up. It's something that sometimes is forgotten. Before we went public with this, we had 2 or 3 extensive conversations with our 30-person mechanics staff. Great guys and girls who've been fixing heavy-duty diesel buses for a long time. And I was concerned they might find a technology like this a bit threatening. I was really impressed. They already kind of knew a great deal of it themselves. And they very enthusiastically have engaged with the management in terms of let's learn more. Some of them are relatively young, and they see this as a growth opportunity to expand their skills and do something new. So I'm cautiously optimistic on that point. The federal grants all require a lot of staff investment and staff training and retraining. So we're very optimistic in that area. And mechanics are hard to find. So we definitely want to keep all of them that we have. The phase in is also an issue. If buses last for 12 years, 11 years after we start, we'll still have diesel buses around. So they will still need to be maintained. Good question, so good reminder.
Great. I'm not seeing any other questions. So thanks so much for this presentation. It sounds like folks have a couple of weeks to get you additional feedback. Is that right?
Yeah, I'd love to have it. Unfortunately, I think November 28th is our deadline. So a week or so from Monday. But all the information's on the website. You don't have to read the whole report. You can just read the executive summaries and watch the videos. And I think that'll give you enough to give us some initial thoughts.
Great. Thanks so much.
Thank you all. Have a great evening.
All right. Moving on to the crash report with Cynthia Redinger.
Good evening. Thank you to the chair and all the commissioners for having me this evening to discuss crash reporting in Ann Arbor. Tonight, I specifically would like to discuss with you how we use our crash data, what the sources of our crash data are, and how anyone in the community is now going to be able to access our crash reporting, and then leave some time for discussion and questions at the end. I haven't taught myself though, so hopefully I don't get off on that one. First of all, just to touch on how we use our crash data. We use our crash data for data-driven decision-making, which is really, when we're setting our priorities and we're determining those systemic countermeasures to focus on, such as the activities that were done with our transportation plan, A2 moving together. And then we do project-specific analysis that helps us mold and determine the types of elements we need in a specific project. And then also monitoring change over time. And that's really what we've been doing with the static crash report that we've been producing over the last couple of years. And the source for that crash data, well, all of the crash data that we're using is the Michigan certified crash data set, and we access it via RoadSoft. And traditionally, the community has been able to access that either through SEMCOG's reporting tools or Michigan Traffic Crash Facts. Starting this year, and I believe you already received the link to the website, we are now producing our crash reporting in a more interactive module on our website. So I have some presentation slides prepared to walk through that and walk through that process. It is very visual. We, working with crash data tends to be very visual. I will commit to clearing all of my slides and describing all of the imagery that are on my slides. But I do want to point out to all the commissioners and to the community at large that if you ever have questions about crash data and you need access to that information in a different way, definitely reach out to staff and we will make sure that we get that ready. We have that prepared for you and we can make that accessible for you. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. If someone could please confirm that you are seeing a presentation slide that looks like a web page. Thank you.
Confirmed.
Okay, so this first slide is our landing page for our website, which is a2gov.org/crash reporting, all one word. This is a screen capture image of the website. So you'll see the typical elements of all the stuff up at the header. This page is housed under engineering. You have some other links on the left bar, and then the crash reporting itself. So there's some introductory information, and then there are 3 major areas to this page. There's the crash types and frequencies area, the spatial analysis area, and the context and further data area. So the first thing that we're going to be looking at will be this traffic crashes dashboard. Now, I've done all of this as screen capture so that we can walk through it very smoothly. I hope some of you have been able to start playing with this tool. And if not, I hope you'll be excited to go play with it tomorrow. So once you click that area that was highlighted on the slide, which it will bring you to the dashboard. And this is a screenshot of what the dashboard looks like. And this dashboard was put together by our IT department, our A2 Analytics group. And just a little bit of information about what the slide is showing. It shows the dashboard when you open it. If for any reason the dashboard doesn't open for you properly the first time, please just hit refresh on your web browser. Unfortunately, there's a bug in the software that our IT department has informed me of. There's a patch supposed to be coming out. Thought it was last week, but just a refresh will reset all of these charts and you'll be able to see them just fine. So this image is showing our overall crash tab, and it shows all the injury levels and no limits on the type of crashes that are included in our data. You can, charts available in this particular section are crashes by year and the crash types as well. So for those of you who have been traveling with the Transportation Commission for a couple of years or otherwise have seen our static crash report that we've been putting out, you can get to all of those crashes, those charts through this dashboard. And as far as you can, filter things so that you can go through and see exactly what it is that you want to be looking for. I also want to point out that if you hover over any part of a chart, it will give you detailed information. So in this case, I did a screen capture from my screen and when I was working with this earlier, and I was hovered over the 2020 bar. Specifically, my pointer, which did not show up, was hovered over the dot on the 5-year rolling average line. So there's a pop-up. It states the year, which was 2020. It gives the number of incidences that happen per injury level. And it also gives the 5-year rolling average. You'll notice the 5-year rolling average is highlighted. It's a little bit bolder in its in the text. That's because that's where I was hovered over. So wherever you have your pointer, then that will highlight that portion of the information that it's showing you. Some other things I wanted to point out, this next slide, it has a blow up image of the filters. And the slide reads that you can adjust filters to customize. So you can adjust them to customize what you're looking for. You can select or remove crashes by worst injury level. For that crash, you can view all crashes or isolate the vulnerable road users. And I wanted to point out that you have to select apply filters to see the updated results. So the filter button will look gray unless you've changed something, and then it changes color to remind you that you do need to push that filter button, which we also have an enlarged image of those filter buttons right here. And you can clear all of your filters rather easily just by clicking clear all. It's a little bit on how to use that tool. So I wanted to give everyone a little bit of a comparison of the new imagery versus the old graphs that you were used to seeing. So on this slide at the top, I have all levels of injury crashes. And so that's all of our crashes at all levels of injury. It has the bar chart per year with our rolling 5-year average. And then below that, it's just the same information presented as it was previously presented in our static report. Highlights are that in the year 2020, we saw a significant reduction in crashes across the board. And in 2021, they came up a little bit, but they are still down compared to where they were pre-pandemic. This next slide is also showing all crash types, and this is our fatal and severe injury charts. So just a comparison of what the new fatal and severe injury chart looks like compared to what the old fatal and severe injury chart looks like. Moving along, this slide shows an image capture of, I just filtered the crashes by year for pedestrian involved. So right now we have filtering on this overall tab for the worst injury level and for pedestrians. So you can do pedestrians only and you can do bike only. That's all based on the static report that we've done previously. So if there's an interest in having some additional filters, we can look at that. Definitely look for your feedback on any of these items. But that is something that I wanted to point out, that all the charts that are available right now are the same charts that were produced in the static report previously. All right, so moving on to the next slide. What I've done here is I have moved from the overall crash tab to the temporal crash tab. So this tab contains charts breaking down crashes by time of day. So like a day of week, month of the year, or hour of the day, and also conditions that we've previously reported on, such as weather and lighting. And as I've stated previously, these are all those temporal charts that were available in the static chart as well. We have the same filtering for this set of charts that was available for the overall set of charts. And moving along, the last tab that is available on the dashboard is our violations tab. So this tab provides the ability to explore the types of violations that have been involved in the city's crashes. So just to give you a little bit of information about this particular screen capture, it's showing the tabs at all of the injury levels, and I have, let's see here, I did not adjust the baseline filtering for the violation on this one, but on this next slide, I adjusted the crash violation to be drove left of center, just because I was curious to see how that one would come out. And so you can see we have all of the data that's available, and I have hovered over 2021 to show that, what our results in 2021 were. So we had 1 non-incapacitating injury, 3 possible injuries, 12 property damage only injuries, and the rolling 5-year average is 16.6 crashes per year. And there are no serious injury crashes in 2021, so there aren't any reported in that hover. Okay, the next slide is the same set of data. And I'm just pointing out that in the upper right-hand corner, there's a little gray button. It has a number, it has a couple of lines on it. And when you click on that button, it'll just pop up and remind you of what filters you have applied. And the last thing that I wanted to point out in these particular charts is that next to that gray button, there's a little 3-dot, find more here sort of icon. And when you click on that icon, you can do a couple of things. You can force a refresh. Which our data doesn't change often enough that you necessarily need to do that. But the two really critical things are, I think, to understand is that you can enter a full screen mode for a single chart, or you can download a chart. And when you enter full screen mode, this next slide shows what that full screen mode looks like. And these are our pedestrian crashes. I've just pulled them up. I haven't hovered over any data sources. So we can see, as with all of our crashes, we saw significant reductions in 2020, slightly higher amount in 2021. But then for everyone, I did go ahead and pull our fatal and severe injury crashes for pedestrians. And this is also that full screen mode. And we held fairly steady between 2020 and 2021 on those. We're averaging 7.2 serious injury crashes per year. So we still have some work to do. All right. So our next thing that I wanted to look at is the spatial analysis area of the website. And so the slide is showing the website again, and I've highlighted where you can get to those crash maps. And these are the maps that have been very popular in the past. So if you click on the traffic crash map link, that will take you to the same maps that you have seen in the static report, just in their native GIS format instead of being produced as PDFs for the city. So this next slide is showing what that website looks like when you click into it. And when you open it up, the map that you will see first is the heat map. And then over on your right-hand side, there are ways to change the map and what you're viewing. So this next slide shows zoom in on some of that. So you can find the layers with the symbol that is shown here that is, it looks like square sheets of paper sitting on top of each other. And I have a large blow up of what those layers are. If there's a strike through the eye, it's off. If there isn't, it's on. And then you can also get to the key for the map. So for the layer that we were just looking at that was open, it's the all crash density layer. And then here is an image of the key for those crashes. And one thing that you might be interested in is shown in this next slide where we have zoomed into an area. This is the Glenn and Fuller area. I've left that heat map on, but what does that heat map really mean? So I've turned the individual crashes on as well so that you can look at, for that particular heat, what's the number of crashes really look like. And you can hover on one of those crashes and click on it and get more information in all of those areas. All right, moving on. This next slide is just highlighting the last section on the website, which is our context and further data area. So in the static report, we would refer to statewide trends, national trends, and SEMCOG data as well. This area is providing links to all of those data sources. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and open up for conversation.
Great. Thanks so much. Brett.
Yeah, I love these dashboards and maps. These are fantastic and something I've been looking forward to. Wondered if you could talk about the refresh rate of the data in here and if whether or not it's linked to the monthly city administrator's crash report.
So this data it represents the Michigan certified data set, which is certified on an annual basis. And I think it's important to remember that when we are looking at systemic deployments and when we are looking at, sort of like how is the system functioning, that's when we are looking at, that more long range, what is the change that we're having over time. So when we're looking at a particular project, we have a much smaller kind of scope of we're looking at what's going on in a particular intersection or a particular corridor. But when we are looking at, those systemic deployments, we're really looking at that kind of that longer range of what's going on. So it's not being updated on a more frequent basis than annually.
Is there a plan to, since the data in the dashboard stays the same, is there a plan to sort of also create some kind of like PDF type report that uses all of those materials? I ask because I send that report to people all the time, and I can imagine that there's utility for someone not having to like figure out how to turn on layers and stuff like that if they just like go to page 17 and you'll see what you need to see. So I'm curious about whether they're like, will we still get a static report since the data is static?
Our intention was not to continue producing that report. I am currently working with Suzanne Flowers, our planner who is heading our Vision Zero implementation, to come up with our plan for how her reporting is going to look. And, what I'm producing and what I'm working with our IT and GIS folks to produce for this will then feed into what she's producing, and what that is going to look like in its final form. We haven't figured out yet. Mostly she hasn't figured that out yet. It's her report. But I think if there's a Raymond, you can feel free to step in at any point because I'm your staff and I'm about to commit your staff to something. But I think if there's a particular interest area where we want to look at a deeper dive, and that's something that we've done in the past where Transportation Commission has had an interest and wanted a deeper dive reported to them on a particular topic area, that we can still, produce one of those deeper dive areas. One of the nice things about producing the crash data in this format is that it frees up time to do more of that deep dive. And instead of spending time, it used to be a little bit of a cumbersome process of downloading data and then manually manipulating data and working it back up. Instead, we have found a technology solution with IT and the analytics folks to where they have it set up so that now it will produce this, and we're going through and we're back checking it and things like that. But then we're freeing up time to do those deeper dives.
Yeah. And I really appreciate that. I think, so for me, the crash maps are the things that I'm most likely trying to point someone to. And I also, my experience using like GIS in websites is that it can be hard to figure out. And so again, that like, maybe there's an ability to link someone directly to like a particular vision of something, but also it's often hard to do on a phone. And so even if it's a collection of maps that are like the maps that we used to get that are this time, they're just screenshots from the system that you've built so that it's not like rebuilding those maps from scratch. I think that would be really useful. So there's often these moments when like a specific project comes up at a specific intersection and it's like, let's check the maps. And sometimes I'm hearing from like residents or people who don't necessarily have a ton of familiarity with the city like web environment, and they've never worked with GIS before. And those are the kinds of situations I'm thinking of where being able to have some like PDF versions of these maps that I can send to people, and that I think others would probably find useful as well. But I appreciate that this is going to save staff a lot of time and enable other kinds of analysis that were previously spent on just compiling things. Erica.
I'd like to reiterate, this is great. It's wonderful to see this up here. It's just lovely to be able to have this so accessible to everybody and be able to dig in a little bit further. I do think that there is probably some utility to having it, I would say, in terms of static reports, at least sort of the year by year sort of, here's what we're looking at and here are the trends, some PDFs that could be downloaded so that we as if folks are just looking in once a year, they can start seeing some trends on how things are shifting, and that might be helpful. I'm thinking particularly in terms of the context side of things, which requires you to do a much deeper dive into transportation data, which is also very interesting and fun, but it's nice to be able to, I think it'd be useful to have us have comparisons to what Ann Arbor looks like versus Michigan versus the United States. I think that the work that staff is doing is really evident in terms of what our trends look like versus what Michigan's trends look like versus what US trends look like, in the last couple of years. So, but then I do have a specific question on the crash types and frequencies dashboard. That first one, that's not coming back up. My computer's going to be slow. Whatever the violations tab. I'm not sure I am looking at that correctly. So it seems like one of the benefits of this, particularly for Transportation Commission, is being able to look at what those types of violations are in terms of, and then what are the types of crashes that are happening. And so it's because that might drive the types of policy solutions that or different types of projects that we might want to be focusing on a little bit more. But it's hard for me to see sort of like, what's the big picture here in terms of percentage of crashes that are involving careless driving, and maybe they involve multiple different violations, but versus failure to lead or some of those factors. Is that possible to do in this? Am I missing that? Or is that not really what this is in this violation page is for?
That's not possible at this time.
Okay.
And I will have to work with staff to see if we can accomplish that in this format, given the tool that we already own.
Yep.
I think definitely if there's something specific that you have an interest in, that's something that we could definitely tease out some more granular data for. But
yes.
it's definitely the kind of thing that, it's not going to be as easy to automate.
Yeah. And I don't know, and maybe I don't know if that's something that you have access to, just thinking about, okay, what are the types of violations that are resulting in fatalities versus,
Oh, that you can do.
Okay.
Let me check something really quickly. I have it open so that I can play with it on the side. I'm going to apply those filters and let's see what we end up with. Yeah, okay, so
You just click on just fatality and then
just fatalities and just incapacitating injuries. But at this point in time, it's not going to say, it's not giving a list of every,
not that many of
every type.
Yeah.
So it's like these are the numbers that we have. You know, so if we were to go into careless driving, and here I can share this. Let me, you know, just go ahead and share my screen, and I've pulled it up. Okay, so I've limited to fatalities and incapacitating injuries. Is it coming through?
Yes.
Okay, and then careless driving. So, you know, here's our results that received a careless driving citation. And you know, you can see that it's a small amount. I don't know if we could find something. Probably failure to yield is maybe going to be something that we're interested in, right? So this is a little bit higher. Like we can tell that we've got we have a rolling 5-year average on here. So we have a trend line that tells us what's going on here. So that is something that we can tease out as well. That can be teased out with this tool without going into greater detail. But as far as, you know, what type of crashes were those particular failure to yields, we're going to have to get into the data on the back end and start pulling out UD10s and reading through UD10s to really understand that.
Okay.
Which UD10, for those of you who aren't familiar, is the name of the crash report in the state of Michigan.
Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Brett and then Pete.
I think I remember in past years there was usually a section devoted to impaired driving, but I don't see that in the list of violations. Is that data available?
I think knowing that that is not available in the list of violations is a great thing to take back to the team. And as you're exploring this tool, please, if you have questions, comments, things that you'd like to see addressed, you can reach out to staff, and we are happy to hear those comments and concerns so that we can, you know, address as many concerns as we have. So the impaired driving, I will definitely point out to the team. Thanks, Commissioner Hanamaki.
Pete.
So this is all really good data to have access to, and so I appreciate this new system. But as it relates to fatal accidents and fatal crashes and serious injury crashes, I feel like I would also like some visibility, you know, in our annual report as to what the city and, you know, other responsible parties are doing to resolve the problem that resulted in that serious crash, because that represents a failure in the system. So what is the outlet for sharing that? Or do we have one?
That is really getting into more of what our vision, I think our Vision Zero reporting will be as we're moving forward. And, you know, this is the data. This is the data that's feeding some of those processes. But as far as where we are on the plan goals and how we're moving some of those systemic changes forward, that will be in the Vision Zero reporting.
I guess I'm not talking about our performance to goals necessarily, but rather a backwards looking looking backwards at what happened in each of these serious crash incidents. Like if we aren't following up on what caused those, then we aren't addressing that serious failure in the system. So where do we look for what the city has done to address those serious crashes? I would like that annually in one place. And I also would say that I think waiting a year to share that information with the community is too long. I think that we should have a faster response for telling people what we are doing to deal with serious crashes and serious failures in our transportation system faster than once per year. So that's, I guess, my feedback on that topic.
Yeah, and Pete, I'll take a stab at this one, and maybe Lieutenant Sherber can help out as well. So, one of the things we are trying to do is strengthen the lines of communication between the transportation engineers and the police department, so that when there is a serious crash that's resulting in serious injury or fatality, that we have sort of a coordinated response. So, obviously, the police department has a regimented sort of crash analysis that they perform. One of the things that we want to try to do is to make sure that if a crash occurs, to do a scan of the infrastructure, right? So, is the signage in place? Is the street lights working? Pavement markings clear? That sort of thing. And if it's not, remedy those as soon as humanly possible. So I think that's part of the solution set there. And then I think, to the point that Cynthia's bringing up is, you're right. Every fatality, every serious injury should be taken seriously, right? And we want to make sure that, we don't gloss over, these are human lives we're talking about. And we want to make sure that we get to kind of the root cause. I will note that sometimes, and again, Lieutenant Sherber can hopefully back me up on this, sometimes they are behavioral, right? In some instances, it's, impaired driving, as we talked about earlier in the meeting. And so when we talk about those behavioral things, there are still those cues from the infrastructure, which again, go back to, this idea of a system approach to what are the things that we can do to make sure that, we're driving down speeds at a system level. So while there may have not been an infrastructure deficiency at that exact location, when we pull up, what are the sort of system-wide improvements we're making to ensure that we minimize the severity of those crashes when they do occur? So it is something we're thinking about. It is some of the things that we're feeding into, the work that we're working with Sam Schwartz. We haven't perfected it, and I do caution us too. We always want to make sure that we're, moving forward to make the change that's really going to result in the outcomes that we hope to achieve, right? And sometimes if it's a behavioral problem that we, or if, let's say the crash is a result of a behavioral instance, we don't want to rush and throw infrastructure improvement at that location if that isn't going to necessarily be the solution set. And I don't think that's what you're suggesting, but it is something that, we are cognizant of. We're trying to figure out and be as coordinated with PD as much as possible. And, really do this system-wide approach so that, the system as a whole is safe while at the same time addressing those specific concerns that you raised. And I know I'm kind of dancing around the issue because it's hard. Every crash is kind of unique, both in terms of location, cause, and effect. And there is no, solution, the same solution you can't, apply across the board. And so I think we're trying to be better about how we respond to those.
I would just like to add that when I say that we need a corrective action, that could be enforcement or it could be education, right? I mean, but I feel like we need to have a corrective action applied to each of these. I mean, so thank you, Rita.
I'm not seeing other hands, and we're also nearing the end of our time. So I think we're gonna wrap this up, but I hope we'll all keep exploring the new tools. Thank you so much, Cynthia, and your team for getting this built. I think it's going to be a really valuable tool for the whole city. So yeah, thanks so much. And other questions and feedback we can just send along via Raymond as stuff comes up. So next up, annual 2022 annual report, which is just quick with Raymond.
Yeah, this is just a heads up. We are going to begin work on the 2022 annual report. And so there is a charge for the Transportation Commission to report annually to City Council and the City Administrator regarding activities of the Transportation Commission, which shall reflect the effectiveness of the city's transportation strategy process and make recommendations for any changes thereto, or whatever that means. I guess what I'm suggesting here is if included in the homework was a link to last year's report. If any of you want to give that a quick look-see and let us know if there are any recommended changes for next year's report. Chris is going to help me compile that. So we're just looking for some initial direction. And the other thing that I'm really looking for here are volunteers. Typically in the past, the chair has written the foreword. And then we've also gotten another volunteer to do a sort of testimonial about either transportation in general or the work of the Transportation Commission specifically. Last year, Wan Wu Lee was the one that graced us with his words, and Molly, of course, graced us with hers in the foreword. So, if we have volunteers today, we can kind of give you some background information about how that could be structured. But we're not looking to produce or finalize the report till January because this is meant to capture everything up through the December meeting. So really just looking for any guidance and any volunteers at this time.
Thanks. And are you looking for these things right now, or is it something where we should like read stuff and get back to?
Yeah, I think for recommendations on how to improve the report, you can keep those coming over the next month. That's welcome. If anybody is just itching to raise their hand to volunteer to write any of these passages, hopefully I'm not speaking for folks on the commission, but maybe Wan Wu or Molly can attest. I don't think it's that heavy of a lift, and staff can also help, provide background or, data, whatever you might need to help with your passage. So it's really just to put, a face to the name sort of thing, and kind of make it more personal and humanize the report. So if we do have volunteers now, we're happy to take them so that way we can start that coordination process.
I think Brett and Julie have also done those in past years. So new kids, we're looking at you.
It's super easy. And it's not a heavy lift. And it's a big picture view in the report. So
think about it. We'll pester you again in a month. Great. I'm just going to keep us moving right along since it's so close to 9. Vision Zero Implementation Committee update.
Yeah, included in the packet was the presentation that was given at the October 24th meeting. I will actually not go into that given how much time we have, but I do want to quickly share with you the speed management tool that we're working on, because I do think you will find that of interest. I'm going to scroll through it very quickly, so my apologies, but the link is included both in the homework guide, it's included in the packet as the presentation packet, as well as on the website. So I'll highlight both of those real quickly. So the bulk of the meeting was really focused on this speed management program and kind of highlighting it for the Vision Zero Implementation Committee. So that's why I thought I wanted to quickly showcase it for you, since it was the majority of what we discussed about. So there's this new online website, fairly interactive, pretty nice. And it kind of steps through these kind of 4 headers of why speed management, what are the tools, where in Ann Arbor, and to provide input. So why speed management gives a lot of the background information that you've heard from us before about, the importance of reducing speeds for safety purposes, and why the focus on major streets in terms of where a lot of our crashes are happening. When it talks about what the speed management toolbox is, the idea is we really want to showcase the types of tools that would be appropriate on certain types of roadways. And so it talks about the different types of devices. Horizontal deflection means things you drive around. Cross-section modification, so this would be like narrowing roadways, things you drive over, such as speed humps, and traffic control devices, such as signage or markings. And then what's kind of nice is as you scroll down the page, it really gives this nice kind of, there's a photograph that shows a picture of the device. So the first one that comes up, I believe they're organized alphabetically, is the chicane. So there's a nice picture of a chicane, and then it also describes it. So, chicane is also called a lateral shift. Talks about what type of device it is. It's a horizontal deflection device. It talks about what cities have used them, and it also gives you a link to, the application of that. And so it scrolls through these: realigned intersection, traffic circle, roundabout, lane reduction, on-street parking. So these are all the tools: bike lanes, lane narrowing, raised medians, curb extensions, and we tried to capture as many photographs from Ann Arbor when available. Chokers or pinch points, pedestrian islands, street trees and landscaping, speed humps or cushions, speed tables, and then I think we're getting to the end: raised crosswalks, raised intersections, speed feedback signs, in pedestrian crossing signs, pavement legends, rectangular rapid flashing beacons, pavement materials, street art. I'm sorry, I'm going to scroll through these a little bit faster. All right, so that gets you through the devices. And so it's, again, this is taking, these sort of traffic calming devices or speed management devices and really explaining them, giving examples so people understand what they are. Then when we talk about where in Ann Arbor, the idea is to really hone in on, what types of roads these would apply to. So this is a major streets speed management. So we identify the major streets and kind of talk about the priority is based on kind of the number of crashes, translating that into the nomenclature of the plan. These are like the tier 1 and tier 2 corridors, down to corridors that don't have, safety targets identified for them. And you can kind of zoom in, you can click on, a segment of roadway, and I think it will display some information. So Miller Avenue, it kind of gives all this detail about, the posted speed limit, the number of lanes, the amount of traffic on there, and then talks about the possible tools, which references you back up to what I just went through. And then the other thing that we're trying to do is figure out a way to provide feedback. So in as much as we want the process to be data-driven, we also know that, people feel strongly about these things, and we want to provide the opportunity for folks to kind of give a bump if there's a lot of community support for a certain corridor. And so this idea of a sort of support form or is embedded into the document as well. And so that is the storyboard as it exists now. And we are currently accepting comments on this. So if you were to go to the city's Moving Together Towards Vision Zero website, which is just the city's website, a2gov.org/Vision Zero is the shorthand. If you were to just go there, it takes you to the landing page for our Vision Zero plan. There, it gives you kind of the overview that I just gave you about the speed management program. But there are a couple of links down, there is feedback. So this program is new and we welcome questions and comments. And if you were to click on that, it will take you to an online form that will allow you to, after you've gone through the tool, if you have suggestions for improvement, we're all ears because we're still kind of, beta testing this and socializing it in the public. We have gone out to several public engagement events. We were at the farmers market and the libraries in the month of October. And so we have already gotten some feedback on the tool and even had a sort of a sim activity where we had a sort of board that had a virtual road on it, and people could reconfigure the road with some of these tools. So, so far it's been pretty well received and pretty interactive from those who have participated in the process so far. So with that, I will go ahead and stop sharing my screen and turn it back over to the commission for questions.
I hope you'll consider the road design that my 7-year-old did, which involved 2 side-by-side bikeways with a bike lane on the side, and then some double wide sidewalks. Go ahead, Julie.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in about the Vision Zero stuff. It's really exciting to see this major streets calming thing coming together. One thing that we discussed at the Vision Zero meeting is that in terms of being data driven, we've got crash data and we've got some data about the amount of traffic on the streets, but we don't actually have systematic speed data. And so it seems to me that would be very useful to have, both in terms of prioritizing, but also in terms of measuring progress when we make a change, to see how it's helped. And so I wonder if that's something that we could maybe discuss as a commission, or maybe ask staff to make a presentation about ways that we might be able to gather systematic speed data. It really feels like a gap to me.
That's a great point. Similar to that is also the need. So we've got car traffic, but I don't know that we have a lot of systematic bike or pedestrian counts. And that feels like another thing that would be useful to have now, so that later we can do improvements. Other anythings? Okay. Moving right along. Thanks all of those of you who've been working on the Vision Zero implementation work. I know it's a big process. Staff report and updates.
Very good. And I should be able to get through this in short order as well. All right, so I will just quickly jump through our progress report for the month of November, show you what has changed. Annual street resurfacing program is substantially complete. You know, a lot of things you're going to see are going to go to bed this time of year because asphalt plants close down, paint doesn't cure, and cement isn't viable either. So you'll pretty much see either things wrapped up or they're being postponed if they didn't get done. Scioto Church, bids are expected to be open in January. Sidewalk gaps, Hiscock was postponed to spring of 2023. Platte Road.
Raymond, that looks like that might actually get done this year. So,
all right.
When I do these updates, sometimes things change between then and the actual meeting.
All right, Platte Road, I think a meeting date was just picked in mid-December. I think it's like December 13th. As soon as that is publicly announced, I'll be sure to share that with the commission. Barton Drive, again, this one's kind of teetering on the edge if the contractor is available or not to finish this work before the end of the calendar year. Earhart, there was a public engagement held on October 20th, and we're currently, looking through that feedback and making modifications to the design as a result. 7th Street in Greenview, some of you have been following this. There was some volume and speed data collected and posted online. Obviously, this commission has broached this issue at their last 2 meetings in September and October. The recommendation did go to City Council at their meeting last week. The resolution that Transportation Commission sponsored was modified, and pretty much the direction, and I'm paraphrasing here, so forgive me if I get the words wrong exactly, but kind of directing staff to kind of go back to the drawing board and look at more of a focus on speed management, kind of consistent with what we just discussed, and really see what sort of appropriate design could come out of that, and then some additional engagement on that project as well. And I think there's also the understanding that the project is also pushed back from a timeline perspective as well by a year. East Medical Center Drive, the project is out to bid. State and Hill, preliminary plans were submitted to Michigan Department of Transportation. Office of Sustainability and Innovations update. The big news is that the climate millage passed on November 8th. And I think some of you heard me allude to it earlier, that we do expect some money to help with non-motorized transportation improvements, since that is, a key strategy in the sustainability plan. So some of that is still being worked out because it's freshly passed. So more to come on that. Street lights, we're up to over 1,000 that DT has fixed this year. Traffic calming is really picking up pace. Granger from States Packard is kicked off, and Granger, Fulmer, and Baldwin are about to kick off, and project websites have been created for those. All right, we just talked about the transportation plan implementation plan, or the speed management. Some of the engagements we did, we received over 100 kind of direct touches with the community. The next meeting of the Vision Zero Implementation Committee is December 12th. I should note the November 14th meeting was actually canceled. And quick build projects, we ran into some of the same problems as other projects, kind of ran out of good weather and time. And so some of those are being postponed to early next year as well. All right, education and encouragement. We are working with the RIDE and the Get Downtown program for Conquer the Cold, and maybe some other bolstering up engagement and encouragement events, such as Bike to Work Month in May as well. We're already starting to think about that. So more to come in that space. And then the RIDE provided an update, which I always feel bad stealing Forrest's thunder, but it looks like ridership is up to about 65% of pre-pandemic levels. You just got a detailed report on the alternative propulsion study and those engagement opportunities that were available to the community. And that concludes my quick synopsis.
Great, thank you. Next up, we have liaison reports. Any commissioners who serve as a liaison to another body or organization are invited to provide brief reports and updates. Yep, Wanwu.
I'll make this really brief. Well, TC1 on Stadium. Erica, sorry if I'm taking your thunder. That one obviously passed. I think it was yesterday. It was yesterday. 2520 and 2540 Pontiac Trail. That's an annexation. That's for that big Robertson Homes. It's an annexation. It's going to go to City Council next, but it just passed through. So that's a development that is offering basically to do a roundabout at Pontiac Trail, kind of in Dew Barn. So that's like way up there on the north. So just because we've always had traffic issues up there, just kind of bringing that to your guys' attention. And the only other one that's really that was yesterday was 530 North Division. That's just going to be a PUD, 24 units. It's not going to increase intensity, but supposed to increase the residential feel going up state, basically Division Street, kind of like near where that bridge is. So I'm trying to think about it. It'll be 6 parking spots for 24 units. It's the only kind of thing that piques my mind. So anyways, TC1, I think Pontiac Trail was really all I had as far as transportation goes.
Thanks.
Molly, I see Larry's hand is up.
Okay, we'll do Larry and then Erica.
It is. Yeah, our Commission on Disability Issues is looking at crosswalks, and there were some that brought to our attention, in particular Arbor View, and across some of the crosswalks there, the curbs are put in such a way that with rumble strips on the curbs, if you are visually impaired in particular, you can be led the wrong way, and instead of being able to go straight across the curb, it'll lead you into the street, into the road. And, it gets a little more complicated than that. But the thing is, we want to put a resolution into City Hall. And we want to not only go ADA, we don't only want them to be ADA acceptable, but we also want them to be best practices acceptable. That's what we're working on.
Great. And if that's something that where you would want Transportation Commission to potentially vote on the resolution as well, we can get that on an agenda. So you can just keep us posted about how that moves forward.
I'll do that. Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you. All right, Erica.
Thanks. Just a little bit more about TC1. Obviously, that moved forward on stadium. One of the big pieces of feedback that I received is as representative, and also just kind of one of my observations as well, was there was a real interest in making sure that as we move forward with the zoning, that we're also making sure that we have the accommodations that are there for pedestrians and for transit users. And so right now, the right of way is pretty narrow along stadium. And so one of the resolution I am working on with for Monday's council meeting would be basically trying to correct for that moving forward. And that actually might have to do more with understanding what our right-of-way vision is for that corridor, and then allowing for the setbacks to accommodate for that, so that we don't end up with not enough space in the future for the type of sort of transportation accommodations that we want to have along that corridor. So heads up that's moving forward. And then on the 7th and Greenview project, I guess I wanted to just, since council ended up deviating a little bit from the recommendation of staff and planning commission, just wanted to, or transportation commission, I just wanted to make it clear that, I think that what number of council members sort of identified was that really there's an interest in a sort of a policy shift about how we approach traffic calming potentially in the city, and more of an integration up front on some of this. And so I think hopefully that coincides with the work that the Transportation Commission's traffic calming subcommittee is beginning to investigate and look at as well. But I certainly don't see it as a challenge in terms of what got presented, or what staff presented, or what planning Transportation Commission ended up recommending. I think it was just identification of maybe policies that we'd want to shift moving forward. And also for anybody who happened to be listening to that city council meeting, there was a lot of public feedback from residents. And I feel like Transportation Commission ended up getting, there weren't always a lot of pleasant comments there. And some of them were not so pleasant from the council table itself. And so I just want to say from my perspective, thank you to all of you for all of the work that you're doing. It's incredible that you're volunteering and dedicating your time to making our city better. So thank you very much. And thanks to staff as well.
Thank you. All right. Moving on to general commission member communications. All commissioners are invited to provide reports and updates. All right. So quick call for agenda items for the next meeting. Things that we've got on the docket coming up. It looks like we've got the Vision Zero implementation plan update, Flat Road reconfiguration, our annual report, our 2023 work plan. So start thinking about what you want us to be digging into next year. Policy agenda input. I feel like that we just did that and now we're doing it again. And I don't know, Raymond, are there any other ones?
No, I think that's what we're tracking at the moment, always subject to change, but that seems to be what's on the docket.
Okay. Yeah.
And Molly, if I may, real quickly, because I'm reminded that the 2022 annual report, I'd love to do a screen capture. You heard me warn you earlier, since we have a pretty good showing of our commissioners here. We used to do in-person, gather around the dais sort of thing, but virtual. So, get your pearly whites out, get your smile going, and maybe Chris, just for redundancy's sake, on the count of 3, we'll just do a screen capture, and if you could do one and I can do one, just in case one of us runs into a technical difficulty. So, all right, is everybody ready? All right. 3, 2, 1, cheese. All right, let me just see if mine came through. Marvelous.
Great.
Perfect. Thank you all.
Excellent. All right. Our next meeting, and take a note of this one because it's different. Next meeting is scheduled for Thursday, December 15th at 4 p.m. So that awkward Thursday time, we've got to avoid various holidays. And if there are no objections, we'll adjourn tonight's meeting. All right, meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Good night.
Thanks, everybody.
everybody.
Have a great night.